Hello everyone and welcome back to Raid Shadow Legends. We're gonna do a lot of summoning today. Alright, before we start summoning, I had summoned some champions off camera, so now I'm gonna show now. Burgoth the Malformed of the Knights Revenant. He is grotesque. Nightmare Judgment attacks one enemy. Ascension skill has a 50% chance of placing a 15% continuous heal buff on this champion for one turn if its attack is critical. Alright. Chemical Stench attacks all enemies. 30% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 2 turns. Passive skill Canister. Whenever this champion is attacked, heals all allies except this champion by 20% of the damage received. Okay. This one I am mad I didn't get on camera. Walking Tomb Dren. How do you pronounce that last one? Dureng. Weird. But yeah, a legendary of the Knights Revenant. I am mad that I didn't get his summoning on camera. Oh well. Corpse Fire attacks one enemy 2 times, instantly activates any HP burn debuffs on the target after attack. Exalted Pyre attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a HP burn on all enemies for 2 turns. This debuff cannot be resisted. That's handy. Death's Balance equalizes the HP of all allies, then attacks one enemy. The HP levels of all allies will be brought up to the level of the ally with the highest HP. The attack will ignore 30% of the target's defense if the target's current HP is equal to or lower than this champion's current HP. Will decrease the cooldown on Exalted Pyre by 1 turn if the target's current HP is higher than this champion's current HP. That was a lot to read. But yeah, I've actually used this guy in the Doom Tower, and that skill has been incredibly useful. Very good champion. And now to his passive, which is also Ascension. Fortress. Reflects 30% of the damage this champion receives back at the attacker if this champion has 50% or more HP. Deals 30% more damage instead if this if the champion has less than 50% HP. Alright. Aura skill increases ally HP in all battles by 30%. Grumbler of the Dwarves. Like the design. Angry Mallet. One enemy places a shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP for 2 turns. No coming back. One enemy places a 50% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Ascension skill Shoulder the Weight. Places a 25% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Places a 30% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. Alright. Aura skill increases ally HP in dungeons by 25%. Gala Long Braids. Like the design. Brutal Bludgeon. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit will ignore 30% of the target's defense. Places a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to 20% of the damage inflicted. Fearless Aggression. One enemy will ignore will ignore 50% of the target's defense when attacking under a shield buff. Ascension skill heals the champion by 50% of the damage inflicted. Places a shield buff on this champion equal to any surplus heal for 3 turns. Alright. Sheer Swagger attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit will ignore 25% of the target's defense. Grants an extra turn if this champion has full HP after using this skill. Aura skill increases ally attack in all battles by 25%. Handy. Very handy. Of the undead hordes, we have Bone Knight. A Death Knight wannabe, if you ask me. Let's see. Mutilate attacks one enemy 2 times. 15% chance of placing a 50% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Ancient Seal. One enemy, 80% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction for 2 turns. The enchanted skill makes it 100%. Death's Figure attacks all enemies, places a 50% increased critical rate buff on all allies, for 2 turns. Next we have Temptress. Slice attacks one enemy. 30% chance of stealing a random buff from target. Useful. Attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Vicious Partner, places a 25% increased attack and a 50% increased critical rate buff on this champion for 2 turns. Grants an extra turn when Seducer is on the same team. The Ascension skill doubles the effects. Of the demon spawn, we have Ertasara. I'm hoping I'm saying that name right. I swear these names are just downright impronounceable sometimes. Mephitic Spines. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of increasing the duration of 2 poison debuffs by 1 turn. Attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 2 turns. Wretched Nexus. 4 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 2 turns. Sorry for the stutter. Ascension skill, Bloodborne. Passive. Whenever either this champion or an ally lands a critical hit on an enemy under a Hex debuff, has a 10% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on the enemy for 1 turn. Alright. Aura skill increases ally speed in all battles by 15%. Of the orcs, we have pig sticker. A very specific name. Vile Substance. Attacks one enemy, 50% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Heartless Curse. Attacks one enemy, destroys target's max HP by 20% of the damage inflicted. Okay. Septic Spearhead. Attacks one enemy 2 times. The Ascension skill destroys the target's destroys the target's max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted. That could be helpful against the Scarab. Aura skill increases ally attack in Doom Tower battles by 21%. Yeah, this is Doom Tower. This is supposed to be a Doom Tower champion, definitely. We have Lumberer of the Ogren Tribes. Gigantic Pulverizers. One enemy, 30% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack for 2 turns. Also, 20% chance of increasing the duration of any decreased events debuff by 1 turn. Flatten. One enemy, 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased events for 2 turns. Ascension skill, Massive Momentum. Places a 15% increased critical damage on the champion for 2 turns, that attacks all enemies. Alright. Of the High Elves and from a Prism Shard, I got Andalia. I did not read that name. I like the sword. Flesh of Guilt. One enemy, 25% chance of placing a provoke for 1 turn. Alright. Elegant Disarm. Attacks all enemies. 75% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack for 2 turns. Ascension skill is a passive. Outplayed. Counterattacks when attacked by enemies under decreased attack debuffs. Increase ally accuracy in all battles by 40 is her aura skill. And finally, from the champions I got off camera, of the Bannerlords, a Jason Voorhees reference, Masked Fearmonger. Very terrifying. Nightmare. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit decreases the target's turn meter by 7.5% if the target is under a Fear or True Fear debuff. Reduces the cooldown of this champion's Taste of Despair passive skill by 1 turn if its attack kills an enemy. Sorry, if this attack kills an enemy. That was a lot more than I thought I had to read. Haunted Machete. One enemy, 75% chance of placing a fear debuff on for 1 turn, and a 75% 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Sorry for the starter, I have no idea what's going on with me today. 75% chance of placing a True Fear debuff on 2 enemies for 1 turn. If it kills an enemy, 1 True Fear will be placed on the enemy with the lowest, while the other will be placed on the enemy with the highest turn meter. Alright. Well used axe. Attacks 1 enemy will ignore 35% of target's offense if the target is under fear or true fear. Ascension skill places a block debuffs buff for 1 turn, a 30% increased speed for 2 turns, and a revive on death buff for 2 turns on this champion if this attack kills an enemy. Fills this champion. Taste of Despair passive. Fills the champion turn meter by 50% whenever an enemy HP drops below 20%. Ooh, a lot of reading on this champion. Okay, now with all that out of the way, we're gonna do a lot of summons. Okay. There's 2 events for the Primal Shards. The double chance for Epic and Legendary. While everything else has the same progressive chance. I've already selected the champions I want to get a chance to get, so... Well, for the delay, let's begin the summoning. Someone good. Alaric the Hooded of the Bannerlords. Alright. Red Fury. 1 enemy, 30% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 7.5%. Decreases the turn meter by a 33% for each buff on the target. Demand Chivalry. Chivalry. Sorry, I do not see... I don't say that word a lot, so... not a lot of practice. 1 enemy, 50% chance of removing 2 random buffs from the target before attacking. Has a 75% chance of stealing 2 random buffs instead if the target has 4 or more buffs. Alright, useful. Ascension skill, Crimson Warlord. Attacks all enemies, 75% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack, and a 50% decrease accuracy on all enemies for 2 turns. Aura skill increases ally attack and faction crypts by 29%. Alright. Next. Drake of the Lizardmen. Love the design. Love the design. Sorry. Death from above. 1 enemy grants attacks return if the target is killed. Alright. Final blow. 1 enemy. If the target has less than 50% HP, this attack is always critical. Alright. Decimate. 1 enemy places a 50% decreased accuracy on all enemies for 2 turns if the attack is critical. Sorry. Ascension skill also places a 30% decreased speed debuff. Aura skill increases ally attack and fetching crypts by 30%. Alright. Next. Okay, we got Hope of the Sacred Order. I like the shield. And that sword's actually pretty cool too. Sequester. One enemy, 30% chance of placing 8 block debuffs. No, block buffs. Debuff for 2 turns, sorry. Arton increases the duration of all Arton increases the duration of buffs on all allies by 1 turn. That's useful. Places a shield buff equal to 25% of the champion's HP on all allies for 2 turns. Very useful. Holy Storm. Attacks all enemies, 50% chance of decreasing the turn meter. Nope, not decrease turn meter. Decreasing the duration of all buffs by 1 turn. I'm used to it saying decreasing the turn meter. Sorry. The Ascension skill changed it to a chance to remove all buffs. Nice. Aura skill increases ally HP and fetching crypts by 31%. Very useful. Give me legendary already. Karum of the Undead Hordes. Bloodstained Swords. One enemy, 50% chance of placing a 2.5 poison debuff for 2 turns. Ascension skill changes that to 5% poison. Fit of Rage. One enemy has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Damage increases by 50% if this champion has more than 50% HP. Alright. Rot Away. One enemy deals damage from all poison debuffs on the target instantly. If the target is a boss, if the target is a boss, they receive 50% less damage from those poison debuffs. Aura skill increases ally accuracy and fetching crypts by 40. Alright. Legendary. Give me a legendary. Darn it. Alright, we got Korgan the Crowned of the Lizardmen. Alright, let's see what he does. Nature's Cycle. One enemy. Boring. The Ascension skill has a 30% chance of increasing the duration of a random buff on a random ally for 1 turn. Alright. Overgrowth. Heals all allies by 50% their max HP, and places a shield buff equal to 15% their max HP on all allies for 2 turns. Sorry. I was not prepared to read that. Attunement. Places a perfect veil buff and a 50% increased attack buff for 2 turns on all allies whose attack is higher than their defense. Places a block debuffs for 1 turn and a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns on all allies whose defense is higher than their attack. I got real tongue twisted with this champion for some reason. I have no idea why. Legendary. Give me a legendary, please. Darn it. Lockwayne of the Sylvan Waters. I love the design. Boon Catcher. Attacks 1 enemy. 30% chance of stealing 1 random buff. Revelation. Attacks all enemies. 25% chance of removing any veil or perfect veil buffs from all enemies. Also has a 75% chance of removing 1 random buff from all enemies. Cool. Focused Force. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Will ignore shield buffs. Resets the cooldown of the skill if its attack kills an enemy. Alright. Ascension skill is passive. Haunt the Haughty. Increases a champion's accuracy by 10 for each buff on each enemy. Alright. Aura skill increases ally speed in arena battles by 20%. Oh, too much. Legendary! Give me legendary! Darn it! Tarshan of the Demon Spawn. Yeesh. Diabolical Hook. 1 enemy, 25% chance of placing a provoke for 1 turn. Soul Shrivel. All enemies has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Demonic Possession. Places a 60% increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. Fills the turn meters of all allies by 20%. Ascension skills are passive. Back for more. Place a 25% strengthened buff on this champion for 2 turns whenever their HP drops below 50%. Sorry for the stutter. Alright, one last time. Legendary, please! Please, legendary! Biscuits! Alright, Lich of the Undead Hordes. Alright. Curse of Blindness. Attacks 1 enemy, 30% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Cocoon. Places a 60% increased defense buff on a champion for 2 turns. Heals this champion by 20% their max HP. Alright. Enervation. One enemy decreases the target's turn meter by 100%. Sorry. Ascension skill places a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Very useful. Aura skill increases ally defense in fetching crypts by 27%. Well, biscuits. No legendaries from the Sacred Shards. Well, let's hope the Power Shards yields any better. Though I hope I don't get a rare champion. We have Enda Moonbeam. That's a very weird name. Is that a ghost sword? That is very unique. Let's see what he does. Silver and Slash. One enemy. 30% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Glimmer. 3 times at random. Each hit has a 75% chance of increasing the duration of a random debuff on the target by 1 turn. Chain of Delusion attacks all enemies. 75% chance of placing a leech debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Sorry for the stutter. Ascension skill is a passive. Lunar Cycle increases this champion's speed by 2 for each enemy under a leech debuff. Mythical, please give me a mythical. Darn it. Soul Drinker of the Demon Spawn. I love his design. And his hammer is pretty cool. Raising Hand. Attacks one enemy. Decreases bomb debuff detonation countdowns by 1 turn. Oh, a bomb champion. Nice. Raining Fire. Attacks 3 times at random. Decreases bomb debuff detonation countdown by 1 turn. Magma Blast. Attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a bomb. A bomb that detonates after 3 turns. Ascension skill is a passive. Set Ablaze. Places 2 bomb debuffs on each enemy that after 2 turns when this champion dies. Oh, okay. Took me a second to think about that. Hey, wait. Oh, that's different. Instead of level 3, it's at Ascension level 5. Okay. That's different. Alright, we got Dudan the Runic from the Sylvan Watchers. And he's part of the progressive event. A very unique design. I like the head the most. Lodestone Claw. One enemy, 50% chance of removing a random debuff from all allies. And that's helpful. Protector Effigy. Attacks all enemies. Places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 50% of this champion's max HP. Sorry for the stutter. I am not talkative today. Increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn. That is super helpful. Wow. Lure of Fools. Places a taunt buff on this champion for 1 turn. Also places a strength 25% strengthen and a counterattack on this champion for 2 turns. Okay. Ascension skills and aura, which increases ally defense in all battles by 20%. A very good champion. Okay. 1 last shard. Please, mythical. Give me my first mythical. Please. Son of a biscuit. Oh, well, I guess. Still got plenty of champions from it. Okay. Now let's do my void shards. Haven't done them a lot, so guaranteed to be a new champion. I get a duplicate as I say that. Pete's sake. Okay, Harrier of the Sacred Order. Alright. Trick Shot, 1 enemy, 15% chance of placing an extra hit. Puncture Bolt, 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Deadeye Strike, 1 enemy. Ascension skill has a 30% chance of inflicting a extra chance of inflicting a critical hit. Sorry. Skillful Partner will ignore 50% of target's defense when his champion inflicts a critical hit. Only available when Hospitaller is on the same team. Alright. Malcolis of the Ogren tribes. Figure Spores. 1 enemy heals his champion by 30% of the damage inflicted. Also heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10% their max HP. This heal will not affect this champion. Fungal Privilege. Place a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns equal to 20% their max HP. Then place the 20% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. will also heal all allies except this champion by 10% their max HP. Yeah. I hacking tongue twisted. Ascension skills are passive. Absorption Roots. Decreases the damage all allies receive by 5%. This champion will receive that damage instead. Alright. Aura skill increases ally defense and faction crypts by 21%. Alright, we have Eviscerator of the Dark Elves. At least that's what I think that word is. Bleed Dry. One enemy 2 times. Each hit has an extra 50% chance of inflicting a critical hit. 50% chance of placing a 2.5 poison debuff for 2 turns if this attack is critical. Lethal Confusion. Attacks all enemies. 50% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Ascension skill is a passive. Suppression. Attacks the enemy champion with the default skill whenever they are healed or receive a buff. Attacks one random enemy if multiple enemies are healed or receive a buff at the same time. Alright. Aura skill increases ally critical rate in arena battles by 16%. Sorry. Alright, we have Vanguard of the Bannerlords. Gathering Momentum attacks one enemy, places a 30% decrease defense debuff for 1 turn if the target's defense is lower than its champion's. Inescapable Wrath. One enemy places a provoke debuff for 1 turn if the target is under a decreased defense debuff. Passive skill, Dismay the Foe. Decreases the duration of all buffs on the attacker when hit by an enemy under a provoke debuff. The Ascension skill removes the need for the provoke debuff. Handy. Increases ally resistance in all battles by 30 is his aura skill. Drown the Blood Wraith. Disgusting. Anchor Hook. Attacks one enemy. 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. The chance of placing a stun debuff increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. Attacks all enemies. 85% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also has a 25% chance of placing a fear for 1 turn on enemies under decreased defense debuffs. Ascension skills passive. Death Feast heals the champion by 15% their max HP every time this champion or an ally kills an enemy. Okay. An epic. Alright. Azure of the Bannerlords. Lunge. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. This chance increases to 100% if the target has an increased speed buff. Aegis. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Places a shield buff on its champion equal to 40% their max HP. That's another way to say it. Though I didn't read it correctly, sorry. Sorry again. Ugh, I have no idea what's going on. The Ascension skill makes so the buff cannot be removed. I think that's I think that's how you say coup de grace. Attacks one enemy, places an extra hit if the target has a stun debuff. The extra hit will always be critical, steals 50% of the target's turn meter if they are not under a stun debuff. Aura skill increases ally HP in all battles by 25%. Not bad. Confessor of the Sacred Order. Stern Judgment. One enemy, 15% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15%. Blinding Light. Attacks all enemies. 70% chance of placing a 25% decreased accuracy debuff 2 turns. The Ascension skill doubles the effect. Unyielding Fervor. One enemy, 35% chance of granting an extra turn. Ascension skill is her aura. Increases ally critical rate in dungeons by 16%. Selenia, Nightcloak of the High Elves. Soulburst Arrow. Attacks one enemy. Heals his champion by 10% their max HP. Heals his champion by 20% instead when attacking under a target under HP burn debuff. Moonshot. All enemies, 50% chance of increasing the duration of any HP burn debuff for 1 turn. Lunar Ballista. 30 times at random. Before attacking, places a 25% increased accuracy buff on his champion for 2 turns. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a HP burn for 2 turns. R attack with Lover. Ascension skills are passive. Solar Boost. Boosts his champion's turn meter by 5% each time an HP burn debuff is activated. Ashwalker of the Knights Revenant. I like the helmet. Great Hammer. One enemy, boring. Ascension skill resets the cooldown of the Devastator skill if attack kills an enemy. Sorry for the stutter. Devastator. One enemy, 65% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Decrease the turn meter of all enemies by 10% if this attack is critical. Backbreaker, all enemies, 75% chance of placing a 50% weakened debuff for 2 turns. Aura skill increases ally speed in all battles by 12%. Not bad. Ox of the Barbarians. Short and simple name. I like the headpiece. Onrush. One enemy fills his champion's turn meter by 10% if the attack is critical. Shatter defenses. This attacks one enemy. 60% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Destroy confidence. One enemy. 50% chance of placing a block active skills for 2 turns. Ascension skill has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit. Aura skill increases ally attack and fetching crypts by 18%. Dagger of the Bannerlords. Double daggers. One enemy 2 times. Each critical hit decreases the target's turn meter by 4%. Precision sabotage. All enemies. 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Sword break knife. One enemy. 50% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Places a 50% decreased attack instead if the target is under a decreased defense debuff. Ascension skill. Aura skill increases ally attack and fetching crypts by 20%. Fanatic of the Shadowkin. Devil Hunt. One enemy. 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense for 2 turns. 30% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense instead if the target is under 2 or more debuffs. Curse Bearer. One enemy. 75% chance of transferring 2 random debuffs from this champion to the target. Rallying Cry. Places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Ascension skill also removes 1 random debuff from each ally. Bulwark of the Dwarves. Love the shield. Hefty flail, one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance of placing a 15% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Meteoric ignition. One enemy, 75% chance of placing a HP burn for 2 turns. Punching defense passive. When attacked, has a 30% chance of extending the duration of all debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn. Alright, that's handy. Ascension skill is Aura. Increases ally defense in all battles by 17%. Alright, very useful. Okay, we have Painsmith of the Dwarves. That is a very ugly mug. Pickaxe crunch. I could not read that well. Other destruction. Sorry. Attacks one enemy boring. Utter destruction. One enemy. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. Ascension skill places a block debuff buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Okay. Helpless victim. One enemy. Damage increases by 50% if the target has no active buffs. Aura skill increases ally attack in dungeons by 21%. Daywalker of the Knight's Revenant. Grave Grasp. Attacks one enemy. Places an extra hit if the target has more HP than this champion. Unnatural Vigor. Places a 25% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Ascension skill places a block debuffs on this champion for 2 turns. Removes all debuffs from this champion. Death Denied. Revives this champion with 30% HP and attacks all enemies after being killed. This attack cannot be critical. Okay. Aura skill increases ally critical rate in arena battles by 21%. Duplicate. Cursed Deep Heart of the Dwarves. Bushwhack. One enemy places an extra hit if the attacker is critical. The extra hit places a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Flailing Pick. All enemies. Ascension skill. Each critical hit fills the champion's turn meter by 7.5%. Deep Ambush. Places a 50% increased accuracy buff on all allies for 2 turns. That attacks all enemies. 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Last shard. Please, legendary void. Please. Please, please, please. Darn it. Not even an epic. Interceptor of the High Elves. Leg Pierce. 1 enemy. 25% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Somnolent Toxin. Attacks 1 enemy. 45% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Ascension skill places a 50% weakened debuff for 2 turns if his skill does not place a sheep. Ward off decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. Okay, and now time for... so I tried just using some shards, thinking I would not get duplicates. Thinking I would get duplicates, and I got someone new, so I'll show them right now. Althar of the Sacred Order. I like the horns on the helmet. Rage, 1 enemy 2 times. 15% chance of stealing 1 random buff from the target. Holy Flame, 4 times at random. Each hit places a 2.5 poison debuff. Ascension skill, double C poison. Brand, attacks 1 enemy. Places the block active skills debuff for 2 turns. Aura skill increases ally attack in all battles by 21%. That's all the new champions from my last batch. I'll see you when I get a new one. Gladiator of the Knights Revenant. Cleaving Axe. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Has a 30% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. If the target's turn meter is more or exactly 50% full. 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns if the target's turn meter is less than half full. Capital Punishment, 2 times at random, has an 80% chance of placing a stun debuff if the target's turn meter is above or equal to 75%. Torture attacks all enemies. Boring. I got a legendary. Nice. I just wish it was not through the group summon. Oh well, what can you do? Let's see. Trumbor of the orcs. He's a big dude. Double whammy. One enemy 2 times. The first hit has a 30% chance of placing a 25% weakened debuff for 2 turns. The second hit has a 30% chance of placing a leech for 2 turns. Figure Explosion attacks all enemies. Remove 1 random buff from all ally. No, 1 random debuff from all allies before attacking. Damage increases by 5% for each debuff removed. Cool. Wall of Muscle. Place a 50% ally protection buff on all allies for 2 turns. Place a 60% increased defense on this champion for 2 turns. Ascension skill is a passive. Whenever Shrug Off. Whenever this champion is attacked, 20% chance of decreasing the duration of all debuffs on this champion by 1 turn. Alright. Now for the legendary. War Mother of the Ogryn tribes. Cry Havoc. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit places a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Special Brew. Attacks all enemies. Places a bomb debuff that detonates after 2 turns. Bomb damage increases by 100% against bosses. Ascension skill. Places 2 bombs instead of 1. Nice. Mother's Touch. Attacks all enemies. Instantly detonates all bomb debuffs if the target is under if this champion is under an increased attack buff. Aura skill increases ally accuracy and fetching crypts by 65. Alright. Finally, legendary. We also have Fortress Goon. Cruel Trap. 1 enemy, 15% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Devastating Wounds. All enemies, 40% chance of placing a 50% heal reduction for 2 turns. Mobile Fort. Heals all allies by 10% their max HP. Plays a 30% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Ascension skill is his Aura. 1 increases ally defense in dungeons by 23%. Sorry, I was out of breath there. Mordecai of the Sacred Order. Purgatory. 1 enemy, 30% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 10%. Has a 60% instead if the target is under HP burn. Times Undoing. Has a 75% chance of decreasing the turn meters of all enemies by 15%. Fills the turn meters of all allies by 15%. Heavenly Flames. Has a 75% chance of placing the HP burn on all enemies for 2 turns. Plays a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 3 turns. Ascension skill is his Aura. Increases ally accuracy in all battles by 40. Sinan Shell, I think, of the Bannerlords. Bloodied Mace. One enemy, 30% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Misdirect. Place a 15% in continuous heal buff on a ally for 2 turns. Ascension skill also plays a Perfect Veil. Lordly Challenge. Places a counterattack buff on his champion for 2 turns. Has a 50% chance of placing a Provoke debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Sweet, another legendary. I just wish I saw the animation. Oh well. Abbess of the Sacred Order. Arrow of Rebuke. Attacks 1 enemy. Removes 1 random debuff from this champion and places it on the target. Useful. Mass Impalement. Attacks all enemies. 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Divine Wrath. Ooh, lots of reading. Attacks all enemies. Places a sleep debuff on this champion for 1 turn. Damage inflicted is proportional to either this champion's attack or the target's defense or attack stat, whichever is the highest. Deals an extra 30% critical damage if the target's HP is the highest. Will ignore 30% of the target's defense if the target's defense is the highest. Ascension skill removes the sleep debuff, casts it on themselves. And her aura skill is increase ally attack and fetching crypts by 34%. Sweet legendaries. Alright. Maeve of the Barbarians. Stupefy. 1 enemy, 60% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Ascension skill also has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn if the sleep debuff is placed. Alright. Slobber Knocker. 1 enemy places a stun for 1 turn. Places a stun for 2 turns if the target is under a sleep debuff. And stay down. 1 enemy. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. Alright. Delver of the Dark Elves. Alright. Necrotic Toxin. 1 enemy has a 45% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Mark for Death. 1 enemy has a 25% chance of... places a 25% weaken debuff for 3 turns if the target is under a decreased defense debuff. The Ascension skill makes it so it cannot be resisted. Finisher attacks all enemies. Places a 25% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns before attacking. Also has a 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on the target for 2 turns before attacking. Aura skill increases ally attack infection crypts by 27%. Harvester of the Dark Elves. Destabilize, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 35% chance of placing a 50% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Accursed Scythe, one enemy 30% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. Sorry, very tongue twistery there. The Ascension skill increases the chance from 30 to 80%. Temporal Burst, one enemy has a 90% chance of increasing the cooldown of one of the target skills by 2 turns at random. Okay, that's very useful. Legendary, come on. Darn it. A Bellower of the Ogren Tribes. Frazzle, attacks all enemies, 20% chance of placing a block active skills debuff for 1 turn. Mighty Bellow, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Bowl over all enemies, 75% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. The Ascension skill also has a 75% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Aura skill increases ally speed and infection crypts by 15%. So all attacks are AoEs. That will be very helpful in faction wars with the right set. Come on, legendary. Darn it. Centurion of the Knights Revenant. Feed the suffering. No, feed on suffering. Sorry. One enemy heals the champion by 15% of the damage inflicted. Freakish Resilience heals the champion by 30% their max HP and places a 30% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. And Soul Possession exchanges remaining HP levels with the target enemy. Ascension skill then equalizes HP of all allies, not enemies, sorry. Okay, not bad. Ooh. Alright, Artur of the Barbarians. Roaring Leap. One enemy, 40% chance of placing a provoke for 1 turn. Raging Bull Attacks 2 times at random. Each has a 50% chance of placing a provoke for 1 turn. Adrenaline Rush. Passive. Places a counterattack buff on the champion for 2 turns when hit with a critical hit. The Champion skill heals his champion by 15% their max HP. Alright. And Vigilant Partner. Passive. Immune to stun, freeze, and sleep debuffs. Only available when Kalia is on the same team. Okay. Not bad. Redo. And for the last champion of this video, I'm gonna do Vanguard, a champion I got from a tournament. I like the armor, very fashionable and cool. Gathering momentum, one enemy places a 30% decreased defense. Debuff for 1 turn if the target's defense is lower than this champion's. Inescapable Wrath, one enemy places a provoke debuff for 1 turn if the target is under a decreased defense debuff. Dismay the Foe, passive, decreases the duration of all buffs on the attacker when hit by an enemy under a provoke debuff. The Enchanting skill removes the need for a provoke. Aura skill increases ally resistance in all battles by 30. Alright.